Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into the 2025 U.S. government shutdown. It's a huge political crisis that's already furloughed hundreds of thousands of workers, messed with essential services, and maybe most importantly, has left the global economy completely flying blind. So let's break down how we got here and what it all means. And just like that, at midnight on October 1st, 2025, the federal government officially went dark. Congress just couldn't agree on a funding bill, which means all non-essential government functions have ground to a halt. This is the first time this has happened since back in 2018.
The first people who feel this and feel it hard are the federal workers themselves. We're talking about 750,000 government employees who have been furloughed. That means they've been sent home without work and, crucially, without a paycheck until this whole thing ends.
But look, this goes way beyond just federal paychecks. The ripple effects here disrupt a whole host of services that everyday citizens and businesses really rely on.
And it's kind of staggering when you see the list. We're talking about real-world stuff, like serious delays if you're trying to get a passport or a visa. Federal workplace oversight, that's on hold. Many Treasury tax functions are just frozen. Even some counterterrorism assistance programs are paused. So, the big question is, how on earth did we get here? Well, it all comes down to a high-stakes political standoff in Washington. Let's dig into the mechanics of how this all fell apart. The direct cause, the thing that actually flipped the switch, was the failure to pass what's known as a stopgap funding measure. You can basically think of it as a temporary patch. It's designed to keep the lights on while lawmakers argue over a full long-term budget. But that patch, that temporary solution, just didn't get enough votes to pass.
But this wasn't just a fight about spending levels. It was a really deep fight over policy, with healthcare right at the center of it. On one side, Democrats were insisting the funding bill had to protect the Affordable Care Act and prevent any cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. On the other side, Republicans refused to include those provisions. With neither side willing to budge, well, the government was headed straight for a shutdown.
So, of course, with a stalemate like this, the blame game kicks into high gear. It's fascinating because even though Republicans control the White House and both chambers of Congress, they still needed a few Democratic votes in the Senate to get the bill through. The Trump administration started calling this a Democratic-led shutdown days before it even happened. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders were pointing the finger right back at the Republicans. And the whole thing was pretty much cemented when the House Speaker just sent his members home, which killed any chance of some last-minute deal.
Okay, so you've got the political drama. But beyond all the theater, this shutdown is creating a much larger, almost invisible problem, a really dangerous information blackout for the entire global economy.
This quote from a Bloomberg analyst just nails it perfectly. See, the government agencies that compile and release all the critical economic data, the stuff that everyone from Wall Street to the Federal Reserve depends on, well, their employees are furloughed too. For them, the lights are off.
And that means we're losing access to absolutely vital information. We're talking about the big ones. Key reports on jobs, inflation, GDP, and retail sales, they just won't be released. And these aren't just abstract numbers. They're the fundamental gauges we use to measure the health of the U.S. economy.
The consequence here is this profound uncertainty. Investors all over the world use this data to make huge decisions. And critically, the Federal Reserve now has way less guidance as it tries to figure out its interest rate policy, which affects borrowing costs for, well, everyone. The markets are, in a very real sense, flying blind.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question. How does this all end? To get a clue, it's actually pretty helpful to look back at the last time this happened.
You have to go back to late 2018 for the last big shutdown. And that one dragged on into 2019 and ended up setting a pretty sobering record as the longest in American history. It lasted 5 full weeks. 5 weeks of furloughed workers, suspended services, and mounting economic damage that, in the end, cost the economy billions of dollars. And every single day this current shutdown continues, that cost just keeps growing. Look, at the end of the day, the only way out of this is compromise. Both Democrats and Republicans are going to have to give something up to get the government running again. But right now, with the political lines drawn so firmly in the sand, a path to that compromise looks pretty far away. And that really leaves us with the central and maybe the scariest question of this entire crisis. It's not just about how many days or weeks this is going to last. With the economy operating in an information vacuum and political positions completely hardened, the ultimate cost to workers, to the economy, and to public trust remains dangerously unknown.